So recording has been started. Let me share my screen. Please write if you can see it. Do you see my screen, guys? No. One moment. What about now? Great. Okay, so I heard a couple of questions regarding sequential requests from my mentee. So I suppose it will be useful to explain how to deal with window fetch and promises sequentially. So let's see an example how promises works in usual way when we return just some value. So whenever we have some promise, I created promise using just function which returns new promise, and it resolves in some delay. So it's random delay from 0 to 1000 milliseconds. And it is also rejects in the same math random value. And so what I have here, we have 3 requests. So let's imagine that we created window fetch, we get some data, request was sent, and then we receive some data. If we return it as a string, it goes to next callback, resolve callback of then, and we can see this console log from previous then. But if we return another promise in then callback, we can see in result a value which resolved from this promise. So this way we can use sequential requests and avoid callback hell. So after this promise will be resolved, this then will handle it. So usually if we return some value, it goes to this, to following thens or catch, right? But with this way, when we return another promise, this then will correspond to this promise. So we can see it in console. I will share the link after that, and you can play with it a bit more. So what we have here, it is let's imagine that it is request to weather API. Then we need some another request using previous data which we got from the server. And if we need another request, we can do it the same way as previous. So it will go in result. Then we will have last promise resolved or catch. So another option to have sequential requests is using async await. So if we have async await, we need to, let's imagine that we have get location function, which is fetching some data, and weather get weather function, which doesn't work right now because Krakow is unknown city. So how to handle reject, how to handle errors in async functions? We predefine async to the function, and if we have async keyword, we are able to use await. So what it does, it waits until resolve or reject of the promise, and it pauses function until it rejects or resolves. So this way we write like synchronous code, but it acts as a asynchronous. So, and we can handle errors using usual try catch. So whenever we how to use this async function, we can call it and then use as usual promise. Async function returns a promise, so we can have callbacks with then and catch. From now, we can see that it is unknown city because we used static method of promise and made it as a reject. So it is like an error, and because of we run our code in try, it returned this error and it went to this catch. So far so good. Font bigger please. Sorry. Yeah, one moment. As usual. Should I repeat examples? Explain it again? Is it more or less clear, guys? More or less. So maybe some additional questions, or I can repeat with this size of font. Yeah, so I had a problem with my Mentee had problem to connect these promises, these requests. So what we need in the task, and usually at our work, that we need to make the sequence. So first promise or request, let's call it request. First request, then we need to use result as an argument for second request. Second request uses first response. And without this sequential request is really hard to understand when second and following requests are resolved. So this is one of the ways to connect these promises, these requests. So you just need to return promise in then. So if you have three or more, you just make a column of these requests. First is calling, getting, for example, it's geolocation, returns the city. Then it is you calling weather API with this location, and so on and so forth. So you can change it to, if you have several classes. So for example, you have weather API class, weather API, weather API, and some, let's imagine that location, geolocation. And then we are using these classes with these methods. Get, it returns promise, and then vice versa. We need to first get geolocation, and then location, we use this class weather API, get location, and then you can use other class to render it. So something like that. You need to approach it, this task with decomposition. So flow of the promises is one task, weather API second, geolocation third, and rendering is fourth. So this way it's much more easier to understand how to work with that if you separate to several classes, several files, and then using promises, you're connecting it. Catch if applies to all previous promises is, yeah, so it will fail on first. It catches first failed promise. So let's check it out. Promise reject. And where is my console? Yeah, of course it doesn't work because I don't have these classes. Yeah, so from catch with first promise reject, and if we use here, it will be second. Yeah. Okay, no more questions. So whenever we have in application more than one request, but we don't need to make it sequential, so we don't need previous response in the next request, like this in column we have. We can use promise all. So what it does, it is also static method of promise class, and we can provide an array of promises. So we are this way we are sending our requests in parallel. I put this console time in the end console time end to understand where is it when it is finished. So this console, this implementation of StackBlitz doesn't support console time, so we are going to use usual console to see this. So we can see that this promise all ended after 559 milliseconds, and we can see I am logging here the resolved value after what amount of milliseconds it was ended. So we can see that promise all is waiting after all promises are resolved. So if you need to take users, roles, or other stuff, you can save time and send requests in parallel this way. So it's promise all method. You provide an array and result. In the result, you have the array of resolved values. As usual, you need to provide catch and take care of errors. Yep. So what is fetch? Window can we use promise all? Sorry, for this particular task with what is the question, can we use promise all for task with weather and geolocation? We can't, because second fetch is required location, so we need sequential requests. You don't have city. You don't know where to get it. You can put request for random city, but it doesn't help us. So great. So fetch a type of built-in promise. It is DOM. It is browser API fetch. It uses it returns promise. So it is different promises. Is an object which provided by language, which has state, and state which is pending, resolved, rejected, and error, and it has then and catch method. But fetch, it is part of the window, this browser API, which allows us to make requests, get, post, put, etc., and it returns promise. So if we know how to work with promises or with async await, we can use fetch and use sequential requests. So for this task, you can separate it to extract to different classes and use methods as I showed previously. So it will be the column of returned promises. In this task, it is only 2. Any more questions regarding this topic? About promises? Not so, okay. So other question that I had from Mentee is listeners in the class. So I created task menu, not task, but menu class with minimal functionality. So it just gets this tag and adds listeners. So I want to explain how to make how to work with correct this. So what this class does, it is just finds the element with ID up and then adds event listener on click and on key down. So on click handler, I'm logging this. So whenever I click, nothing happens because it is demo as usual. Let me check. So listeners are imported and yes. So this corresponds to the element, HTML div element. But when we want to use when we want to change context to this corresponds to menu, we need to bind this function. So if I want to handle key downs, so for example, I'm pressing buttons right now, keyboard, and this corresponds to menu because I binded this context. Without this bind, it would be the HTML document itself, because it's called in event listener. So whenever you want to use in event listeners class as a context, you need to use bind. Yeah, so now we can use in handler this corresponds to this class menu, and we can use its properties and methods. Yep. So it's pretty much all that I wanted to share with you. Maybe you can have more problems that you faced. Want me to clarify it? I have object like below and key to object property stored as string value. How can I access it? See more. Current weather. Have an object like below and key to object property stored as a string value. So let me copy this to understand the question better. Well, not this. So we have some object, right? And the question is how to get this property. You're using correct way. Sorry, but it doesn't work for you. So question is how to get these clouds, for example, right? So path is object, then current weather. Yeah, so your path is correct. What error do you have? You want to save a path to the clouds instead of value itself. Okay, interesting approach. There are a couple of ways to use this, but I don't want to teach you bad things. I would suggest to just create a function, usual function get main, or I don't know what is it, main description, get weather, which provides weather data. And then provide this path. So I don't think that it is efficient to work with strings. You can separate it, extract to the method of the class, or standalone function, pure function, which takes just an argument and knows the path to itself, not to itself, to the needed data. Will it work for your case, Sebastian? Great. Yeah, so with strings, we can use eval, but functions is much better. Then when API will change, you just change one function, internal path, and that's it. You don't need to rewrite your application. Questions could be related in general about JavaScript. I will try to answer. I haven't yet touched the voice controls. Can you tell us something about that? Nope. Voice controls. Speech. I worked with it, I don't know, a year or two ago, voice controls. I will Google it. So what we have? I remember speech synthesizer. And so what we have in voice. Better to see. Yeah, well, this voice, I generated voice controls. Get voices. We need to use controls, right? One moment. Input. Let us check right now if we have here this part. Listeners, right? So okay, I will Google it and get question in the provide answer in the chat. From now, I can't answer it. So Przemysław, I will provide answer in Discord after this. Okay. So regarding my question, I found this solution and it works when there is no array. Split, weather data, reduce. But weather is an array of objects. I need the first one. It is an array of objects. So what we are trying to achieve here. Yeah, you're splitting key that, where is this code? It is in listeners. You're saving key, this key, right? It is your string. You're splitting it, and from the object, and accessing the last value, but it is the same. So reduce it works the same as this function, but it runs excessive operations. So what reduce does, it takes the key and its value, right? So we are getting from object, it is lat, and if it is an object, it goes current, and then weather, and then if it's 0, it goes main. So why this function will not work for you? Why do you need to have additional reduce? Weather is an array of objects. I need the first one. So only first object it will work. I just wanted to show that I found the content of it. Okay. Okay. Okay, great. In weather task we have the code is covered with the unit test. How we supposed to deal with it? It's covered with unit test. The most popular right now is Jest. So I would recommend for unit testing using Jest. And then you need to cover, if you split your functionality to classes and methods and work with pure functions, it will be much easier to test. So I assume that it is not required for you to write behavior tests, like end-to-end tests, unit tests. Where is it? Schedule and weather task. Fancy weather, yeah. Unit tests. Yeah, so unit tests, it is 2 points per test. Yeah, so unit test, it's when you're checking just a unit of your code. So if we are talking about this class menu, unit is this method or this one. And when I'm talking about pure function means that it relies only on its arguments and it doesn't mutate internal argument, argument, and it returns the same value with provided, if you provide the same argument, it returns the same value. Yeah. So 3 rules for pure function. If you make your functions pure, so it will rely only on argument without any additional data. It will be easy to test. So how do you usually write tests? You're importing this, you make an instance of menu in before all, it runs before all your tests, and then you can test, you create your instance of the class and then check the method. So you write expect method add-in listener, and then, or I don't know what methods will you have, but you provide some argument and listen to returned value. So when you don't have returned value, you can mock this object. So you provide instead of real document DOM node, some document element, you can provide just an object with this listener, and then you use spy to check if it is if it's called. So where is spice ingest? Yeah, so usual unit test is looks like that. So you're in before you make your instantiation of the methods or classes, and then you provide it and description. So it should be able to call, and then you make some arrangements and then expect and to be truthy, for example. So usually it is either returned value, you're checking returned value to be or to be truthy, or you're checking how many times it was called, or with which values, with which arguments. So it's really wide topic. I don't think that I will be able to explain you in 10 minutes how to approach unit tests. Just wanted to, yeah, how to cover by test the function with new date. So new date, so you have impure function, am I right? Жанна. So let's imagine that you have a function and yeah, so it is impure function. It is really bad. So let's imagine we have impure. We have some string and we return new date or date now. String ingest we can rewrite. It was in mocks. We can rewrite modules. So here we don't import date, right? Implementation. Every testing framework has this feature. So is date mock. Could you please provide example? How do you use this new date? So do you need to check this particular value, these seconds, milliseconds, or minutes? Why do we need, so date object is then built in the language. So we don't want to test this particular functionality with new date. So maybe we can avoid the part which is involved in it. Weekdays. So we are checking weekdays. So according to with provided data, one moment. So weekdays. Do you have this function somewhere? Can we have a look? It will be easier to understand. If you get in some data from now, from current data, it is get day, right? So it is functionality of date object, and it is built in the language. I don't think that we need to check it, but if you provide some initial date, and you want to check future or some derivatives from this date, you can substitute with mocks. You need to check arithmetics like plus, minus, and etc. So if you provide, yeah, this is valuable point that it starts from 0. So maybe you can, yeah, okay, great. So now we have a function, right? Where is this? No, it doesn't work. Local string. Yeah, so date is built-in object. Now is the method of built-in object. The local string, it is the object of in the language itself. So I don't think that we need to test it. Like if you have expected, you can test it is this function get week name. So it should provide correct dates. One moment, sorry. You call it with language, time zones. I don't remember what is time zone. We provide time zone and to be expected value, but then we have date now, right? So what week is now? So I wouldn't actually test it. I know that there are cases, not cases, but ways in frameworks or libraries like Jest, Jasmine, Mocha, and so forth, and so on. But it is actually all here is built in. So you want to check implementation of this function, right? I'll write down here to test date now. Yeah, and another question was voice input, kind of. Okay. Devik is correct. Okay, I will think about it after this lecture or this meeting. Switch statements are awesome. If you don't have 20 or 30 values there. Future dates. Where is it? Yeah, in general, I think we don't need to check it, but I need to have a more context. Maybe we need. Any other questions, guys? Yeah, you actually asked here, right, about Google Map. I worked with it a couple of years ago. I don't remember if they changed it. Maps Google or developers Google.com. Google Maps API, right? So I think did you get some access token for it? Yes, definitely credentials, etc. Yeah, so do you have some particular error? Because as usual with these APIs, I would follow just documentation of this provider of map. You can use Google or Open Maps. Embedding callback function from async defer. Actually, async and defer, it is two different attributes for script tag. You need to use one of those. Do you have an example somewhere deployed? Or link to the documentation that we can check? Both of them. It's interesting. Why do they use both of them? Okay, so this callback doesn't work for you. You defined it in the same scope. Is it in window? OpenMaps is using leaflet to embed their map to the page. So they don't require some other additional functions, right, Kate? You can import it, you can make it as a standalone function and import it in index.js and or provide it to window. Just use JS and CSS from leaflet. Quite useful. So try to use your init function. Jacek. Try to use your init function in window. So if you provide it from different files, you import it, but then just apply window some name equals your imported function. So we need to expose it. This script, I suppose, is looking for this. This callback will be called, it is JSON-P. Yeah, you need to have it in window, expose it. And whenever you have app.js and your modules, they are covered by bundlers. Do you use some bundler, Jacek? Or native JavaScript modules? As simple as that. Sounds good. Okay, so it's one file. Yeah, just try to expose it to window. Yeah, Kate, thank you for sharing. It looks clean. Did you have any problems with documentation? Like everything worked smoothly? It works without any problem. I just needed to register to one more maps. Okay. Some other questions, guys? Okay. How are you in general? Do you like this program? Struggling with some tasks? Great. What about Red console every day? Yes, on daily basis. And then if you don't work on production yet, then you will have Red console not only in your browser but in your IDE, and third Red console in CI, in continuous integration, when you have your bundles tests, E2E tests, integration tests. So it is our life. Yeah, Red console, it means just errors. Errors are usually red, and console in browser, console in IDE or text editor, and in some remote tools with deployment, tests, etc. So if you don't have any questions, I think we can wrap up. Or don't hesitate to ask anything. Good for you. I need to think about changing Red console to black. Okay, that's all from my side. I don't see any questions, so I will take care of 2 questions that I have written down and provide answers in Discord. Maybe tomorrow, if it will be not easy to resolve. Thank you for your time and have a nice day, evening. See you later. Bye.